Hello everyone, and welcome to this video. In this video, we're going to be reviewing Danganronpa Ultra Despair Girls. The game's developer is Spike Chunsoft, and the game itself is a spin-off title from the previous main games, and the game itself was released in 2017 for the PC. Well, without further ado, let's get on with this review. The game's story has you take control of Komaru Naegi, who has been imprisoned against her will for over a year now. One day, she manages to escape, only to find that the city she's in has now been attacked by killer Murakumas. If you're not exactly sure what that is, just think of a giant killer robot bear, and that's essentially it. She meets up with Toku Fukawa, and the two search for a way to try and escape from the hellhole that they're in, while also trying to avoid killer Murakumas, and also trying to avoid murderous children, who released the Murakumas on the city, which then killed all the adults. The game's story itself is very well put together, with lots of twists and turns along the way. It's a very clever and well put together story that takes place after the events of the first game, and it also leads into the second. The only real issue with this game's story is that honestly you can't just pick this game up and play it if you've never played a title like this before. You can, it's just that if you do, you're honestly going to be confused and you're not really going to have a clue what's actually going on. You won't also understand a lot of what's actually happening between characters when they mention previous characters from past games or what happened to them in past events. It's a game which really does require you to be a follower of the series to fully understand what's really happening during this game. With all this being said, however, it's most likely going to be a fan of the series who purchases this type of game because of what it's actually based off. Yes, a random person could just buy this on a Steam sale without any clue about its previous releases, but honestly, if they do that, then they're just going to be lost in what's actually going on in this game. It isn't something like Resident Evil 4, for example, where Capcom just didn't give a crap about the story anymore, and just threw it out the window to make a simplistic action shooter game. The game's main focus is its story, so if you want the most out of this game, you are going to have to play the previous games, or at least go and watch the anime of this series. You get two characters to choose from in this game, and can switch between the two whenever you like during gameplay. The characters interact well together, and the English voice actresses for the two main characters also happen to be two of my most favourite voice actresses around, so that's always going to be a plus for me. There are other characters you meet along the way, most of them at the start being normal people who end up being killed by the Murakumas, or dead bodies which you see laying around everywhere. As the game progresses, you will come across new types of Murakumas and other people who are also trapped in the same situation as yourself. You also run across characters from past games and brand new characters as well. The game's main focus is on the two main characters, and what happens between them both during the events of this game, and what eventually leads up to the reveal of the mastermind behind everything and what they're actually after from all this chaos. It is a good mixture of characters and events that you won't be expecting that will keep you hooked on the game's story. The two main characters are pretty much always talking to each other during the game, so there won't be any long periods of awkward silence or anything like that. I'd also like to point out that the voice actresses for this game did a very good job of portraying the characters, and that's not me being biased in any way, but because of their great acting skills, I really did feel like I had a feel for the characters and the situation that they're in. This title is meant to be set after the events of the first game, but also that leads into the second. The title is a type of spin-off game, but unlike other spin-off titles such as Neptunia and Blanc vs Zombies, this title keeps to the main story from the previous games, and isn't its own separate thing. So even though it's technically classed as a spin-off, it still continues on from the series' main story. The only thing that's changed gameplay wise for this title is that the developers went with a third-person style action game rather than the style from the previous two other games. If you're a follower of the series, then this might be rather a bit of a change for you, as the style of gameplay has now changed and you no longer get any trials where you had a murder and had to figure out who exactly did it. Instead, you're now in a city and have an over-the-shoulder type view from the main character as they switch between using a megaphone style gun to using scissors to take out the Murakumas or whatever else comes to attack you. You get sections in the game where you can upgrade your abilities and you have to collect Kuma coins in order to do this. You also have various other things to do while playing the game, such as collecting books which grant you new abilities, learning new moves, finding the hidden icons in each level, and also trying to complete the arcade machines in one go. Graphics wise, the game puzzles me if I'm being honest. On the one hand, the game's graphics are fairly good, but on the other hand, the game's graphics makes me wonder a lot about the development of this game itself. To begin with, the game was originally released on the PS Vita, and then later on the PlayStation 4 and PC. Now, here's the thing, while playing the game, I really didn't feel that this was meant to be a PlayStation Vita title, but more of a PlayStation Portable title. The reason for this is that when you play the game, you will notice areas you're in are rather small or confined, like corridors or sewers, or if you're outside, you're restricted to small locations. The Vita isn't a weak machine, and has handled some top titles in the past, so when playing this game and looking at the graphics, it's just confusing. It's a Vita game, yet I see all the tricks companies used for PlayStation Portable titles to make them work on that system, but in all honesty, that isn't needed here. It really does make you think if the game was originally meant to be a PlayStation Portable game at the very early stages, and then just moved on to the Vita once the PlayStation Portable was abandoned. The graphics themselves seem rather confusing and do come across as sort of PlayStation Portable-like rather than Vita, in that a lot of actual renders in the game are very low quality, and some objects in the game are extremely low quality, to the point that when I'm close up to them, I'm not even sure what they're meant to be. Objects in the game, such as doors, bits of building on the ground, vending machine, desks and tables, all come across as low quality, and appear to have a low poly count as well. Objects also get reused a lot in this game. The amount of times that you're going to see that same type of desk or chair, for example, will make you wonder if Tower City only has one IKEA, and they must have an extremely limited range of what you can choose from. The characters and Murakumas are all rendered well, and come across looking quite good, but then the rest of the game's graphics do seem to be on a serious budget. You won't notice when you get close to a lot of objects in the game that a lot of them are not actually even 3D objects, but instead they're 2D objects placed in a way so that they look 3D from a distance, but then when you get up close, you see that they're 2D and just very poorly rendered. The animation style switches from 3D to 2D cutscenes, and then also rendered CGI scenes. The game also suffers, again here slightly, due to the fact that the CGI sections are those straight up rip files from the Vita itself. What this means is that when you play the game and the CGI sections start up, you're going to notice very quickly that everything looks rather grainy and blurred and stretched out, and that's because it is. The original video is basically blown up to the resolution that you're displaying on your screen. So if you take a small video file and blow it up, it is going to look stretched and grainy. It just comes across as a type of cost-cutting measure from developers, which I honestly feel could have been avoided, because the game's graphics themselves aren't that bad. I do just feel like the game has been done on a budget. The developers did a good job of trying to represent a hellhole that you're meant to be trapped in. The city does look in ruin after the events which are meant to have happened, and the music itself does help add to the game's atmosphere. But I do have to question a few things about the game's representation. To begin with, all the dead people are displayed in a pink, bland model, with no features of any kind on them. I'm not sure if this was done because they wanted the other people in the game to be faceless anyones, but it just comes across as if it was done as a type of cost-cutting measure, so they could reuse that character model countless times for people. Another issue is that the blood in the game is a type of neon pink colour, and while I understand that the blood's been this type of neon pink colour since the first game, it still comes across as odd, because the entire series is based on death, murder, despair, horror, and a whole bunch of other psychological issues. So to then make the blood in the game pink seems rather odd, considering that in the very first game, you have to deal with someone who's been stabbed to death. It's almost like making the blood pink and making the dead bodies in the game bland character models with no textures is almost some type of trick to possibly get the game rated at a lower level, or make it so that the game won't have any issues when being released in certain countries, such as how Left 4 Dead 2, they removed the police officer zombie from the German release of the title because of the laws that are there. Even if it's something as simple as making the blood pink for the Japanese release, because I know they can be a little touchy on certain subjects, it still comes across as rather stupid. You're selling a game which its entire focus is on murder and people being killed. In the first and second game, you're shown dead bodies, but with pink blood, and realistically, I think seeing the actual dead body must be worse than seeing red blood. The game does do a good job of representing the world that you're meant to be trapped in, but at the same time, I really do wish that the developers had stepped the game up a gear and shown the actual faces and such of the dead bodies that are everywhere, and at least changed the blood to red rather than keeping it pink, or at least giving the option in the Western release of the title to change the blood colour and show everything. I really did like exploring this world that the characters are stuck in and trying to escape from, but the game really does do a poor job of representing a lot of things, such as textures for a lot of objects and small areas needing to be loaded each time that you visit. It really does spoil the mood if I'm looking at a pile of people who have just been killed and then see the characters break down in despair, only to then look at an object next to them and only think, Christ, that looks really badly rendered. It's almost as if you're looking at PlayStation 3 rendered characters, but they're on a PlayStation 1 rendered world. Do you want to buy Ultra Despair Girls? Truth be told, if you're not a fan or follower of the series, then no. I say this simply because if you just pick this game up on a Steam sale without any clue as to any of the past games, then you're going to be lost in this game's story and not have a clue about what's actually happening 90% of the time. You will just end up wondering why there's a lot of talking in the game and why characters interact a lot instead of just going around shooting everything in sight. The game's very story driven, so you're going to need to be a fan of the game's series to begin with if you want to get the most out of this title. You have to have had at least played the previous games, or at the very least watched the anime series to truly know what's going on in the game itself. Otherwise, you're just going to be lost in a game's story and not have a clue what's actually happening. If you are a follower of the series, then yes, this game is for you, but be prepared for a few things such as the differences in gameplay style, but also that this game is far from perfect, suffering from various issues such as the game's wonky camera system, the fact your character can't seem to walk in a straight line, and the game's got awful collision detection, which is going to annoy you very quickly. The amount of times you will be walking and trying to get past something, only for your character to appear to be stuck on the spot, gets rather tedious after a while. Ultra Despair Girls is a good game, but it does suffer a lot from various issues, and I can't help but feel that it's a rushed out title, and that if perhaps the game had been delayed by several months, that it could have been a much better game upon release. As the game currently is, a lot of review sites have it listed at around 60 to 70 out of 100 score-wise. I feel that that's rather harsh myself, and that the game's a good solid buy, if you can get it on sale for around $9.99, possibly ever so slightly higher. I wouldn't pay more than $11.99 for this game, as it isn't that long, but it's still enjoyable. I mean hell, I still enjoyed this a lot more than I did Final Fantasy X2. At least the girls here have kept their focus rather than spending 80% of the game doing mini-games. So if you are going to buy this game, then do so when there's a Steam sale, as it's a good solid buy, which should last you a while, especially if you are going for a perfect score on each chapter. It isn't a perfect game, but if you are a fan of the series, then you can't really give this a miss, as it's a great addition to the franchise. However, if you are a newcomer to the series, I really would recommend playing the first and second game before this, otherwise you will just be completely lost. Ultra Despair Girls is a good game, but if you are going to get it, then I can only really recommend getting it when the game is on a Steam sale. Well, that's it for this review guys, thanks for listening, thanks for watching, and please subscribe.